Thank you so much for sticking with us this morning on Sunrise at Sea, and I hope that you enjoyed the conversation that earlier on Sandra had with Sarah and I. And I, for one, honestly, I was actually just telling the ladies, I felt more of a viewer than actually a panelist, because I felt like they were speaking to some of my past, and I know almost broke down, but I told myself, Shivan, you are a queen. We're doing this today. Anyway, you are in time for yet another very interesting conversation. And the question that we did pose on our social media platform was your views, of course, that is at CTV Uganda, and it said, would you prefer to take your children to a single-sex school or a mixed school, and why? Ladies, would you prefer to take your children to a single-sex school or not, and why?
Mixed school, definitely for me.
Okay.
It's a mixed school.
Why?
Because I feel that growing up, you don't learn how to deal with the opposite sex if you were not taken through it growing up. Yeah. So if you have these boys, and I have 3 boys, yeah, if they go there and then later on, all their lives they're in a single school, then later on, they wouldn't know how to interact with ladies.
Yeah.
I feel so. Because in my senior school, I went to a mixed school, and we had things such as socials. You remember those things?
Yes.
Socials. So it was like etiquette when you're having dinner. It was like a whole thing. You're having dinner, so you'd have conversation, and then you'd have a dance. Yeah. So it was that interaction. You get to interact and you get to know, okay, boys are like this, or girls are like this. And yeah, coming out of high school, it was, I would find like some girls who were very timid and very scared around boys. They didn't know how to act around them. But for me, I was very comfortable around them, because I learned that from school, from that surrounding, which I think is very important.
Okay.
In life.
Sarah, before you actually respond, you triggered a question in my mind that I was asked that time. I remember we were having a discussion on whether children should be allowed to choose their schools. And I remember back then when I was growing up, I wanted to go to a mixed school. And my reasons were exactly what you stated. And I was asked, are you going to school to study, or are you going to school to interact? Are you going to school to have prom? Are you going to school to get more about boys? You're going to a single-sex school.
But life is all about interaction. Life is all about interaction. Even if you go to school and you get those grades, you're an A student and everything, in a workplace, your boss is a guy, or your colleagues, you're not going to learn how to interact with them, because you're not skilled to. You don't know. So life is all about interactions, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Sarah?
You're asking me or what I would prefer for my children?
I'm asking you, then we shall go to what you prefer for your children.
Okay, me, Apollo Sarah, as a female person, I would prefer a single-sex school.
Okay.
I went to a single-sex school in my high school, and for me, my rationale was self-preservation, and I wanted to concentrate academically and just get to know myself without the distraction of boys. I even, after my senior 4, my mother asked, would you like to change your school? And I was like, no, I still want to be in a single-sex school, because I realized when I was in a single-sex school, I had somewhat become an enigma, or all the girls in my school had somehow become an enigma. And like there was a mystery to us that everybody wanted to figure out, like, oh, why are girls from this school this type of way? Because at school we were taught self-preservation, love yourself, get to know yourself, like build yourself, self-esteem. And it's not that we didn't have any interactions with boys. Like the boys came, you know, more often than not, like maybe every 2 weeks for school dances, for school dinners, for school assemblies. We would go visit the boys' schools and whatnot, but come back. But I realized that every time girls from my school, from the single-sex school, visited the mixed campuses, all the boys were like, oh, wow. And I loved being an enigma. So for me, I prefer single-sex schools, especially for girls, because above everything else, and I've already said it, it encourages self-preservation. You get to learn to identify and get to know yourself without any, interferences
Oh,
from the opposite
altercation.
sex. Yes.
For me, I think it would be in the aspect of, if one asked me where would I take my children if I had them, it would be an issue of how have I raised my children. If I've raised my children in an environment where there are no boys, I do not want to immediately expose them off to boys immediately. If I've raised my children in an aspect of the girl grooming, then I would probably want to take her to a single-sex school. However, if I have raised my children in a way that they're able to communicate with the opposite sex, there I would have no issue, because again, at a young age, I mean me at a young age, I was battling with some insecurities. Yes, I wanted to go to a mixed school, but my parents thought single-sex school was better for me, and I'm glad they made that decision for me, because then I was able to discover myself that even when later on I went into A-level and went into a mixed school, I was actually ready to fend for myself and stand out of the rest. But just to give more insight to this conversation and to break down exactly what we mean by single-sex education, which we're talking about this morning, it means single gender education can be defined as an education administered where the environment consists of only one gender. So it may be a boys' school or a girls' school. Now, the major difference between co-ed schools and single-sex schools are the students. While co-educational learning happens in classrooms which have both boys and girls, single-sex education happens in classrooms which have either boys or girls. So it's either the boys or the girls. So ladies, what are some of the cons or disadvantages of taking your child, either a boy or a girl, to a single-sex school? Let's first dive into that before we look at the mixed schools even.
I think one of the things is they don't get to, I feel they don't really get to experience completely, like I said, interactions with the opposite sex. So they have like this one-track mind, in a sense that not in other areas, not in other areas, but because like Sarah said, you get onto this road of self-discovery, there are no distractions and everything. But I feel that when it comes outside that, interaction with the opposite sex is lacking, if I would say. Plus there are other instances where you find same-sex relationships. These things happen. They have happened in single schools. So I think for me that's a downside.
Okay, how about you, Sarah?
For me, like Sandra said, one gender or one sex doesn't get to properly learn how to interact or handle themselves around the other gender or sex, especially when children get into adolescence, puberty, you know, and get into adolescence. Then of course hormones are raging, and then, you know, we end up having situations like, you know, teenage pregnancies when the children go home for holidays. But the other con for me, especially in boys' single-sex school, is that it's like they promote the agenda of toxic masculinity.
Absolutely.
And I don't like that, because I have a lot of friends who went to single-sex boys' schools, and they have that toxic masculinity in them. They think that having to, you know, break down and show vulnerability or cry is weak. They detach themselves from anything feminine. It's rather an open denunciation. They won't even touch a pink handkerchief.
Yeah, it's that bad.
It's like, it's really that bad. But that is the thing that I really don't like about single-sex boys' schools, that they do not teach boys to be nurturers. They do not teach them to be able to speak up. And this leads them to get into it leads them to become adults who are not emotionally mature, and this later puts them in a place where they fall into depression and have to deal with mental, you know, health issues like anxiety as well.
I like the fact that you highlighted, even before we look at the brighter side of why you would probably want to take your child to a mixed school, but also I like the fact that you highlighted the aspect of adolescence and puberty, and then Sandra highlighted the fact that, you know, your children may not be able to probably communicate with the opposite sex. And I personally, it happened to me, because at a young age I was in a single-sex school. When I finally shifted to a mixed school, like every time I would see a boy, it's like I had seen God. It's like I had seen heaven. It was that bad. Here I am telling my tales on
my
TV.
goodness,
But yes, it was
Shiva.
that bad. And trust me, I'm sure there's so many girls out there who feel like that. Like when you're from a single sex school and then you're shipped off to a mixed school. When you see the boy child or when you see the girl for the boys, it's like you have seen a god or a goddess. But
Exactly.
anyway,
And one more thing, Shivan, I also forgot to mention this con with single-sex girls' schools. Because in single-sex girls' schools, women empowerment is taught and pushed. And that is a good thing. But it also is a bad thing in a way when young girls are taught to be very assertive and very aggressive. It puts them in a position now when they go out there to find lifelong partners, they are, they refuse to compromise for anything, and that can be detrimental to them, getting married. And that's why you find a lot of empowered, strong, independent women are single because of, sometimes it's the schools that they went to. I can speak up, I can take care of myself. Why are you here? So it ties into toxic feminism as well.
It's better than seeing a man as a god or a goddess. But anyway, let's look on the brighter side. What would we be achieving as a parent or as someone that you're speaking to probably this morning? What would they be achieving if they chose to take their children to a mixed school?
Oh my goodness. I think from my experience, like you said, when girls, and I'll talk about this from a girl's perspective, I watched this during the holidays. When we would go into holidays, you would see the girls who went to single-sex schools because they don't know boys very well. I mean, this is like, there's a curtain, they don't know, They would be, most of the times they'd be taken for a ride because they were naive about some issues.
That's true.
They were very smart. Girls from single-sex schools were absolutely smart.
Correct.
But they were not boy smart. They were not boy smart. And I think for us girls that went to mixed schools, we were very assertive when it came to boys. Very assertive. They could not push us around or tell us, And they would always look at us, the girls from us, and say, these girls, the audacity. I'm like, dude, I might look like a butterfly. I will sting you like a bee. You watch yourself. You're backing up the wrong tree. We were so assertive because we would go through this stuff with the boys in our school. You get it? So that's something that we learned. I feel girls who went to single-sex schools lacked this, though they were absolutely smart girls. Very smart, book smart. They were absolutely smart.
Okay. Well, for me, in my perspective, I would think mixed schools really give a child a whole variety of the kind of environment they're actually going to live in, because we have seen for very many children, when you go to a single-sex school, when you come out into the real world, let's say you're probably going into university, I mean, you're exposed, you've not yet been exposed, and then it's a whole different thing. I actually remember in my single-sex school, I will not mention, but this is definitely a discussion we are going to have, because of the fact that every time we would have social, or would have these parties, they would invite the opposite sex. The guys were, or the ladies at that school were always hyped. So they used to put fuel in our rice. Anyway, that is a conversation for another day.
Fuel in the rice?
It reduces. Actually, the logic behind that is that it reduces your sexual drive. Like I said, we shall get into that conversation. But let's look at 7 factors to consider when choosing a school. Ladies, concentrate.
I'm still shook.
That has blown my mind.
7 factors to consider when choosing a school. Number 1, qualified teachers and management. Of course, the management can make or break the school. So it's very important that even while you're looking for whether to take your child to a single-sex or mixed school, look at the school management. And the second one is choosing a school for their curriculum. I mean, if your child is probably or if you want your child to have an all-round curriculum, they have the math, they have the science, but also they have the outside subjects that they're able to do. For example, they're able to do MDD, they're able to be exposed to learning instruments, they're able to be exposed to having catering, if that's the kind of thing you're looking for. You might also want to put that into consideration. You might want to look at the school culture. For many parents, for many moms, they don't want to probably cut off their children's hair. So if that is something you're looking at, you might also want to consider the school culture. Then the school values, the transportation time, helpful extra co-curricular activities, that is what I was talking about, safety and security, and then of course it is important that you get to learn more about the school. Finally, ladies, as we wind up this conversation, your parting shots. Minus the fuel thing.
I am still trying to wrap my
talking
head
about
around
that
that. But I just wanted to add one more thing. The pros about taking your child to a mixed school is that it allows your children to be put in a healthy, competitive, environment, because you have boys and girls in your classroom. In the classroom, they can, compete on the same, level ground.
Yeah, yes.
Even the co-curricular activities, they're able to, compete against, the sexes can compete against each other on the same level ground. So I think for me, my thing is, take your child to where they want to go. If they're comfortable with a single-sex school, take them there. If they're comfortable with a mixed school, take them there, and just closely monitor and see how that works for them.
Finally, Sandra.
I think you should give your children a holistic experience to education, because education does not just happen in the classroom, it also happens outside the classroom. And this is about interactions. We human beings were made for many things, and loneliness or living a solitary life is not one of them. So they need to learn these other skills because they will really help them in the future. Well, that's my 2 cents.
And well, that wraps up the conversation that we had for you this morning on Our Views. At the end of the day, I mean, the choice is left to you as the parent and the child. Sit down, have a conversation, decide. Do you want to go to a mixed school? Do you want to go to a single-sex school? Weigh in. The side that wins more is where you take. Actually, and that winds up the conversation that we had for you this morning. Don't blink.
Well, thank you for watching Sunrise at Sea this morning. We hope you had a good time, as we did, right, ladies?
Yes, we did.
Well, all good things or everything must come to an end, and we are at the end of our show this morning. But don't forget that we'll be back tomorrow morning from 7 a.m. all the way to 9 a.m. From the ladies and me here at the Sunrise at Sea studios.